Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Church Office podcast. My name is Gavin Smith and it's a joy to be here today and to welcome Penny. Good to have you on the podcast, Penny.
Great to be back.
Today's podcast is about finance. We've been involved in some training yesterday. But before we get into the topic, I just want to give a quick shout out and a big thank you to a couple of people who've been in contact this week via the podcast, have been messaging. Bridget Jones from King's Lynn, the King Centre, thank you so much for your encouragement. Brilliant email and so encouraged by what you were sharing. And so I just wanted to do a shout out to you. Shout out to John Shafford in Surrey, who's also been so encouraging, who's been listening in every time on the podcast. So thank you very much for him. Penny, met this really interesting guy at a conference a couple of weeks ago. Matthew, his name is. I won't give you his full name, but a church administrator from Dubai.
All right.
Kind of underground church, leading kind of in the background of his church, administration and ops. So really interesting. I'm trying to persuade him to come on the podcast, and I don't know what he can share and what he can't share, but he's just moved from Dubai to London. His wife's got a job over here, so something quite exciting to look forward to on the podcast. So,
we have a congregation in our church, which. Many of the congregation actually have come out of the underground church in Iran.
Really? Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. Just listening to the story, and I went to their conference in Germany a couple of years ago, and the life and excitement and passion, I could only summarize it as they know what they've been saved from and they know what they've been saved for. And we take that for granted, don't we? Being able to worship and being able to go to church on a Sunday. And if it overruns, we get upset. If they overrun, they're not bothered. Because they can worship in freedom. So brilliant. That'd be great to hear.
That's great. I love the fact that the podcast is being listened to. I think it's something like 21 different countries have listened to the podcast. So it's so cool. And thank you for listening in today. So we're chatting finance. We did some training yesterday and a UCAN roundtable event. Fantastic job. Penny, give us a bit of a summary of who was teaching and what they were teaching, and then we'll get into some conversation.
Yeah, I think I shared yesterday. The purpose of UCAN is to help people in their roles in their workplace, which in a lot of instances is a church in an administration or management role. But actually, we're more about the person as well.
Yeah.
It's about helping people with their spiritual life in addition to the practical tasks. So yesterday we were talking about, we did some spiritual input and then some technical input about money and money management and financial management. And Tim Wyatt, who's a great friend of mine, he's an accountant, chartered accountant from a church in Leeds.
Yeah.
So he was helping our thinking. His two key points, I think, were around wanting to help build people's confidence in terms of finance. And then he talked us through budget setting process, what they did in their church, and then we were able to discuss that afterwards. But then he was also talking about how we communicate financial information. Communication in what we do is so key, isn't it? So I'm sure we'll expand that a little bit more.
Yeah, I love that. I loved his heart. I thought he came across really well. I certainly left the session feeling more confident and more kind of aware. I love the way he started with kind of breaking down the budget and saying, right, what's realistic, what's factual, what's aspirational, what parts of your budget are that, and to rethink about, sections of your budget that are based on last year and also sections of your budget that are there to go, right, how does God want us to use this money to extend the kingdom, to take the gospel out there. And so I love this thinking, and I worth clicking on to UCAN and listening to the session, getting the training notes that I know will become available in the next week or so.
Can I just add in a point there? Because it came out of our discussion group afterwards. One of the ladies in there was saying, that's how they prepare their budget. But then at their annual Thanksgiving Day, and I love the fact it wasn't a budget setting day, it was a Thanksgiving day, giving thanks to God for what he's done, but also in advance. They then share with the congregation if they've got a shortfall in their budget. These are the things we believe God wants us to do. How can you partner with us in that? And I just thought that was an amazing way of not just sort of looking at it in an isolated manner, but this is whole church involvement in what does God want us to do? He's given us the resources. How are we going to use them well for building his kingdom?
Yeah, it's true. And I think, Penny, some of the people in my group, let's talk about income first, I guess, and people's giving, because that's the key thing, isn't it? If your income's coming in as you expect, you're able to do, what you're doing in your budget. Your expenditures are just going to kind of flow out and work from there. But people's giving, there was an interesting stat, wasn't there, that was published from an online, that gathers people's online giving. Do you want to share it with us? Because that was quite staggering, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, roll back to 2020 where, we had a couple of days notice that we had to actually close our places of worship. And for those whose primary income source is the offering bucket or the collection plate, that had a massive impact sort of overnight, didn't it? So I know a lot of churches helped to transition their members and their congregations to online giving. But this particular statistic said that in the year of 2020, the online giving, I think that includes gift aid as well, was £129 million just through this particular online giving provider. In 2021, however, there was a £24 million drop. So you're talking probably a 20% drop from there. Huge, and the giving was only at 105 million. So that's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is huge, isn't it? Yeah, it's a reduction. And we've known some church leaders who have, have faced real difficulties, and no one that I've known has had to close down because there aren't any finances. But there are challenges, isn't there, that throw up of, how do we reduce expenses for ministry? Do we have to let people go? There's some really tough choices, isn't there, that some churches are doing. What was great from the people that I spoke to in our UCAN group yesterday after the session was that for many churches, they had already got a kind of standing order policy. So lots of people were giving through standing order. And I just think it is the grace of God, isn't it, to have a tool like that, to have something set up in your church that, enables you to budget well, enables you to have regular income coming inside. And I think lots of churches have moved to that. And I think that's a healthy thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, my passion is for stewardship and talking about giving and biblical finance. And we're in the middle of a generosity series in our church at the moment. And the pastor's preach title last Sunday was Tithers, Tippers and Tantrums. And it was really interesting because we were talking about people's giving and talking about, what does the Bible say about this? And I know this podcast isn't about that. Maybe that's for another day. But, there are people who just sort of throw a few coins in the bucket, whereas actually when we show people and actually open the scripture to them about what God's saying about bringing the tithe back to me into the storehouse so that there's going to be food in the house. That regular giving, it really helps churches, doesn't it, to help with their budgeting and knowing what's coming. So yeah,
it really does. No, it is really helpful. And I love the fact that when we were in our group yesterday with the UCAN event, there were people that were doing different things. So a number of churches in my group had PDQ machines, and they were thinking that we had a conversation about how do we reach the next generation, encourage the next generation to give, because those who are in their 40s and above, are quite happy to set up a standing order, have been regularly giving. The DNA of the church is very current, it's very clear with them. But for younger people coming in, you can find churches where there's a delay in people setting up regular giving, and lots of people have come up with kind of PDQ machines or online giving was being pushed, and to enable and help a next generation give more frequently, and that was new to me. So it's good to hear different things and be challenged in that way.
Yeah, I went to a seminar last week at a conference I was at that was it was online giving, so the stewardship around online giving and next generation givers, and how do we pastor millennials in terms of their giving. And what was really interesting was that the generosity level of millennials is significantly higher than the generosity level of older people.
Yeah,
but they give to cause rather than just because. So we spent a lot of time looking at, so there's a biblical teaching on giving anyway, but how do we tell those stories of impact? How do we make this something that somebody would choose to give towards? How do we show them? I say them because I'm clearly not a millennial here. Well, no, never. I have four children who are. But actually telling the stories of the impact. How do we engage with them? How do we build a story of your giving has enabled into even our online response, even our automatically generated email that comes back with, yes, you've given, thank you very much. Did you know what we were able to do with that money?
Yeah.
So those kind of things, I think that's part of the way forward, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think Tim's discussion about kind of communicating financial information to non-financial people was a really good topic. How am I communicating our finances to the staff that need to know certain information, to the wider church and kind of our church members, and also to our community, how we're using funds and stuff like that. We hire out our building quite a lot and are able to use the funds that we get through conferencing and hire to try and bless the community, improve the facility, sponsor projects and things like that. So it's I was really challenged by that. I think, how do you tell a story? How do you connect people to what they're doing? Their giving monthly has made a difference, and what difference has it made? Because we know it, because we see it every day. I see all the sheets, I see all the expenditure, I see the things that we're involved in. But for a regular member, they wouldn't have that access to that information. And that, I think some of the points that you raised on that were excellent.
I've been quite challenged recently about the mission of the church and how we convey that story to the congregation of what the church is actually doing. Because I think, we're so fortunate to be involved in the day-to-day, what's going on. We get the chance to have the evangelistic conversation with the photocopier man, or, whoever it is coming through. Sorry, it could be a woman, coming through the door, whatever it is. But the rest of the church don't see that. Half the time we have a staff WhatsApp which is just alive all the time. I've just spoken to this person, I've just spoken to that, and wouldn't it be great to get those stories out? We're talking about communication here. How good for the congregation, the wider church, to know all that's being able to be done, even if it's just paying for the staff member's cost, but the staff member was there when that person who was broken came through the door, and not just on a Sunday.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we've all sat in those kind of church meetings or those Sunday mornings where someone's presenting the stats and the information. And I was really challenged. How do we make this alive? Like, I'll try and use pie charts and try and use things that might engage. I've seen other people, have got their tables, and you kind of squint in trying to think, right, I can't even see the numbers exactly, but telling it through story, and it's easy to do that with kind of Mercy Ministries or Food Bank or those kind of project things where you've got some things that you can easily measure. But how do we do that on some of the other things that are much more general budgets? How do we connect stories to the fact that the building and we've paid off our mortgage? How many of our members would know that our church building is we're mortgage free? And that's a story of God's grace and provision and kindness to us as a church. And how do we celebrate that? And how do we gather people to go, wow, we've never have dreamed of paying off our mortgage this early, but we have, and we have because you've given, and that's incredible. And thank you for doing that. So I love that. I love these points on that. And I think if listeners have got any other ways that they think are creative to do it, then please share it on the socials, because I think it's an area I want to not just hear once, but I need to explore more and more. How do I do that with the team as well as just the wider church?
I found, actually, not to answer the question, but in addition, I found that getting somebody who's not a technical finance person to explain it is a great way, because people engage with that. So if I stood up and started to talk through a list of numbers, I would have a really good go at making them interesting, but I need to be always aware that I can go into techno speak, whereas I think Tim yesterday gave us a great, a 4-point sort of, where are we at now? Where do we want to get to? How are we going to get there? What else do we need? That kind of thing.
Helpful, wasn't it?
That was really helpful. I also really loved his point, because we do need to steward well the resources that have been entrusted to us. We really need to be wise and faithful stewards. Biblical mandate, I love doing that kind of thing, and I have a great team who help me. But there's always that challenge, isn't there, when you get into the sort of slightly more complex conversations of, but what about faith? Thought you said God was our provider. Well, he is. So why are we worrying about that? But we don't not worry. We just have to. Our job is to be the wise stewards, isn't it? So there was a great point. Sorry, go on.
No, go on. No, keep going.
I was just going to say the great point, which is a tension to be managed rather than a problem to be handled, I think, is that, you've got your group of finance people saying, if you want to do this operationally, this is what it requires. These are the resources we require. Where are we going to get those from? And then you've got your operations people working with the pastors or the vicars who are saying, yes, but we want to do this ministry. And there has to come a point where faith meets finance.
Absolutely right. No, it's absolutely right. I mean, I've been kind of living in that this week. We've been talking as a pastoral team about the whole, I've had a passion to talk about the rebuild. So after COVID, how do we help leaders and those working in teams and administrators, how do we help them rebuild the church and kind of grieve the losses and be able to move forward? And so we're putting on a conference in June called The Rebuild. And you start pulling together speakers and you start looking at the expenses of what it's going to cost to run this conference. And you're thinking, wow, this is going to end up being sort of £4,000 or £5,000 to do. What happens if nobody comes and we've already kind of invested this into this area? And that kind of mix of going, actually, well, if we can put something on that's going to really serve, is God going to bring people to it? And I think within the first hour of us going live on the conference promoting it, there was one person that signed up straight away, immediately. And it was just so encouraging, thinking, oh, actually, we don't know this person, we don't know this church, but somehow this guy has got hold of the conference and has signed up to come, and I love that kind of thing, is that we need to go and say, right, let's go and invest this money to put this conference on, and let's watch God do something, that faith element to come in. And I love the fact that we've been praying for it, and we're going to be involved in seeing different people come to it along the line. So that it's that kind of tension. But if you would look at it risk aversely, you'd say, oh, that's a bit too much money to be investing into a conference where you've got nobody officially signed up already. Couldn't you do a kind of pool and get some interest first before you launch it? But no, here we are, we're launching it and we're just throwing it out there straight away.
Yeah, I was in a conversation a good few years ago where they just suddenly chuckled and said, I always thought accountants were geeks, but you're a faith-filled accountant, you're a woman of faith.
Yeah.
So what do you mean? He said, you seem to be able to balance the looking after things and the wise stewardship with knowing that God's going to do it.
Yeah.
And he says, doesn't he, in Malachi, I, the Lord, don't change. He is our provider, and he promises that when we're obedient, he will bless.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't always mean we get all our money back, but he means we're going to be blessed.
Yeah.
And that's not prosperity gospel. That's Bible truth.
Yeah.
He blesses us for being obedient. And if you've listened and you're being obedient to God in putting on something, he will provide no matter what. Yeah. And that might just be a one-off donation after the event to cover the shortfall. You don't know, do you? Yeah. But I genuinely always hold to, if we're doing what God says he wants us to do, he provides our needs.
Yeah.
Not necessarily our wants, but always our needs.
Yeah, so, I love that. Go for it. I think it's right. I was talking to a pastor this week, and he was saying that he had a church member that came to him and said, right, I know it's been tough. I know our giving's been reduced, but I want to underpin the wages of the staff. That if you get to a point where you're struggling, not with us, but another church, a smaller church, and they've got 2 or 3 staff working for them, if you get to a point where you need help, I want to be the underpin that goes, I'm going to cover this. And it's just remarkable, just came totally out of the blue and just absolutely blessed the leader that's able to take that whole concern and burden, if you like, for the finance, and he's able to put it aside and just focus on what God's called him to do, that ministry side of things. How can he rebuild the church now? And I love that, isn't it? I love the fact that if we can be good stewards and have the faith field, that we're able to, in many ways, move forward and serve the church and find joy in it, even in these kind of difficult decisions,
And don't rule out as well, and I know you don't, there's a spiritual gift of giving. Mm-hmm. Of generosity. I was watching a short film last night, and it was Life with a Purpose, and it was from a medical doctor who had a real passion for mission work. Yeah. So wanted to just pack in at university stage and just go onto the mission field. And he was out in India, and he realized God's call to him was, actually, no, you need to go and be a doctor. Okay. Not to go and be a medic in the field in India, but go and be a doctor, because every time you earn and you can give, that funds missionaries at a much lower cost. But that was his spiritual gift. He realized that God had given that gospel patronage, that that giving to raise funds to enable mission to happen. So there are people who will never get out on the streets doing that kind of thing, but they will certainly be there, and God speaks to them before he speaks to us sometimes, doesn't he?
I love that. It's so true, isn't it? There are people like that in our church that just faithfully, wonderfully, they're their place, their part in the gospel mission is they provide funds and they encourage, and it's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
So anything else that stood out from Tim's session for you, Penny? Or in your group discussion that you were encouraged by or surprised by?
I'm actually not going to go back to the group discussion. I'm going to go to right at the very beginning. I don't know if you remember, I asked people for prayer and praise reports, answers to prayer. And I've shared this a couple of times since, because I was so blown away. And it's bad to say it's a revelation in the last couple of weeks, but it really is, that we don't always have to fix everything.
Yeah.
God can speak to everybody, not just the people on the finance team.
Yeah.
And a couple of weeks we have something like that. But one of the ladies at the beginning was just telling us that they'd had a phone call out of the blue from the landlord, and he just agreed to wipe off 18 months of rent.
Wow. So it was amazing, wasn't it? Yeah.
It's absolutely awesome, just that God can put that into somebody's mind. They might not even be a Christian who was doing that, not that it matters, but God can speak. And I think sometimes for me, our job is to do our bit. Our job is to do what God's gifted us to do and be wise, but he can do so much more than we can ask or imagine. And I think sometimes my narrow focus needs to be just lifted back up again. And that was just one of those instances where I just went, God, you really are good.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely right. Yeah. And for me, when I'm doing the finances in the church, prayer is something that happens alongside it. So I can be sorting out the gift aid and just realize that we've got some new people that have signed up, that have given faithfully, and you can stop in that moment and just give thanks, can't you? And you just go, God, this is incredible. You providing additional resources and new people that are coming in and giving straight away, and that's wonderful. And then like you say, you can see God provide a resource or a person, or you've had a rebate on the VAT, or something happens that's out of the blue, and you just got to stop and give thanks, isn't it? And so this kind of faith meets kind of operations. There's prayer in the middle of this as well, isn't it? For thanksgiving. And there's prayer in the middle of going, Lord, we need your help in this. So we got to a point where our gas contracts and electricity contracts have come to an end, and we're in this kind of energy crisis. And I'm thinking, Lord, would you help us do this? And our building's quite big, and so there's only 3 or 4 providers that can provide energy to us because of the number of units that we use. I don't know if you're similar to that. And so you're limited to a number of companies. And we're thinking, how on earth are we going to get a contract? How on earth are we going to be able to find something that's sustainable and workable without it being too much of an increase? And God just provided, British Gas. And we just came across a really skilled individual that God just seemed to just appoint for us to speak to, that made the process so easy. And we were able to sign it to a contract before everything just went mental on the prices. And so we've seen like a 40% increase, but for some churches, they've seen 70, 80% increase in there. And I mean, we're putting out something like 15,000 on gas, 15,000 on electricity a year. And, those kind of increases are crippling, aren't they, to a church budget. And so, but God's provided even in that kind of situation where nobody else in the church is going to be necessarily interested in the gas and electricity prices. They're probably concerned about their own thing. But there's a story in there, and there's prayer in there, and there's just thanksgiving in there. And I love that part of our job. I love that's how it connects to the kind of spiritual faith and ministry and ops and faith. All of those things are just mixed in together. And I just celebrate God's grace. And we're kind of the first ones to discover it sometimes. But we've got to realize that real privilege. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and not to trump your story, but it was just a reminder then. We had a very large bill due to go out, and it was just going to, of our available funds that particular day, it was just going to take us right down to, we weren't going to go overdrawn, but it was just going to take us to, we've used, and I remember saying to one of the guys in the finance office or the finance team, as long as we've got just enough for today, we just need enough for today. And, talking about it and praying it through that, we had enough for that day. And that was just like God providing for the children of Israel in the wilderness. Yeah. Just enough for the day. If we've got more, it's going to go moldy, or, that kind of thing.
The manna from heaven.
Absolutely, manna and quail, that's what we were talking about. And so we in faith decided we'll make all these payments, we're supposed to pay them on the right day, we'll do this. And then by the time I actually got into the office, I'd had a phone call from another person on the finance team. They hadn't spoken by that time, saying, I need you to be sitting down. You will never guess, we have just had a £10,000 donation in today.
Wow.
And it was just one of those faith moments of, we didn't know how we were going to do the next few days, but God knew.
Yeah.
But we still have to keep on reminding ourselves that it is just enough for today. That doesn't negate good stewardship. This is, those principles are there.
Yeah, absolutely.
He can do whatever through whomever, because he's God. Yeah. And I'm really glad he's God, not me.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? And it's such a good reminder, isn't it? God is going to resource his church. He's going to build his kingdom. He's going to take the gospel and change people's hearts and lives. And he's providing for all of that. The great shepherd is doing that, and that just gives us hope, doesn't it? And joy and peace. These fruits of the Spirit are present because we can trust in a God who's going to look after us, who's going to provide exactly what we need. And like you say, how can we be faithful? How can we serve our churches and our teams and our leaders and our members to do this whole area of finance well? It's great. It's a great adventure, and it's a privilege to be part of it, isn't it?
Yep. Definitely.
I love it. So, Penny, should we call it a day there?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good. Encourage those who are listening to the podcast, if you're not part of UCAN and you're serving in a role behind the scenes in a kind of church administrator or operations role, please check out the UCAN site and see. And the session that we're talking about is on finance, and I know there's lots of different topics that are coming up. What are the 2 roundtables that are coming up, Penny?
We've got one on well-being and the next one on recruitment. So people focus, the next 2, one in May and one in July.
So these are great, useful, and available for members. So please consider getting involved in doing that. 2 promos then, 2 conferences. So we're running a conference called The Rebuild. I'll put it on our social media for those who are leaders, those who are serving in teams, church administrators, for everyone to come along to. So please come and sign up and get involved in that. It's a 2-day conference. UCAN are doing a conference end of June.
That's right. Yeah.
That information is out on the socials of UCAN, so please check out those and sign up. These conferences are useful, aren't they? I think time away from the office does you good as a church administrator, as an ops director. And I think getting to a conference, getting some investment, put together a little finance budget for training. Churches are terrible, aren't they, for these kind of things? We'll fund theological courses and we'll fund leaders to do different things. But talk to your senior pastor, talk to your trustees, talk to those who are involved in making big decisions and say, could we put some money into this? Would you invest into me, into this area, that I can do a better job and serve more effectively behind the scenes? So worth thinking about. So any questions, like I say before, please contact the church office at questions@thechurchoffice.co.uk. Please look at the website. There's resources. There's also some finance guides. There's some other things that you can download for free that may just help you in your role, or at least save you some time and a bit of confidence maybe. So we'd love to do that. Penny, thank you so much for your time. It's great to chat to you. Love having you on the podcast, and grateful to God for you and all that you're doing in your church and in UCAN and the wider body, and blessing the church office. So thank you for that. We will see you again. Bye-bye.